How are you?
Joe, I'm doing terrific. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderfully. Really good to talk to you, man. There's so much going on. Let's dive right in.
Sure.
Emmanuel Macron, the French president, came here, had played nicey nice, glad-handed, hugged. I think they might even smacked each other on the rear end with President Trump. Everything was great. It was all hunky-dory. They were singing French tunes and everything else. He goes in front of Congress, and you were there, right?
I was.
He goes in front of Congress, decides to say that nationalism is the same as withdrawal, is the same as isolationism. He prays that America will get back into the climate accord. He doesn't want us to stop the Iran nuclear deal, and basically says we have to stop with all of our own prosperity and share it with the world. Ted, did I miss something? Was that a different dude than we saw yesterday? I mean, what happened here?
Well, look, Beggs, I think you're right. It reminded me of the Charles Dickens novel, A Tale of Two Cities.
Right.
This was really a tale of two speeches. Actually, the first half of Macron's speech to Congress was terrific. I mean, it was talking about the historic friendship between the United States and France. It was talking about how France stood with us, starting with the Revolutionary War,
right,
fighting for our independence, about Lafayette fighting alongside Washington. He talked about America and France fighting side by side in World War I and World War II. The first half was wonderful. And then suddenly it veered dramatically left. And I think Macron made a serious mistake essentially giving a Barack Obama partisan State of the Union address, where he started just giving a bunch of leftist positions, which had half of Congress, all the Democrats, standing up and hooting and hollering,
right,
and the majority of Congress, the Republicans, sitting there stone-faced. It's unfortunate to see a foreign head of state decide to come in and give a harshly partisan speech rather than being a statesman. I wish he had chosen to be a statesman instead.
Well, what I find interesting is that, you can't hear my show from where you are, but I said exactly the same thing, that basically he was pulling a Barack Obama. Do you think that Macron thinks that the majority of the American people are like-minded with him, that we elected Trump by accident, that we have Republican majorities by accident? Does he think that flyover country really is a bunch of rednecks with AR-15s that don't understand that politics stuff? I mean, why would he come out and do that in our country and denigrate our president in front of our representatives? It's weird to me.
I don't have a good answer to that. You're right. Much of his speech denouncing nationalism and advocating multilateralism, it was clearly intended to be a rebuke to the president and a rebuke to America. And I, for one, would neither stand nor applaud at those. We don't go to France and tell them how to run their damn country.
Nope.
And they ought to show us the same respect.
I couldn't agree more. It's Ted Cruz, the senator from the great state of Texas. Ted, when it comes to France, one of our first trading partners ever in the Revolutionary War time. So you're right. They've been friends a long time. I'm going to fast forward to NAFTA, which was a ridiculous deal made by Bill Clinton, another trade deal with our friends Mexico and our friends in Canada. It's got to be reworked. Does it have to go away? Can this form of NAFTA be saved? Do we have to scrap it and start all over? What do we do?
Well, I'll tell you, when it concerns NAFTA, I think the state of Texas benefits a great deal from NAFTA.
Right.
We have 2.2 million jobs in the state of Texas that depend on international trade. And I think the administration is right to work to renegotiate NAFTA. The agreement's over 20 years old. It certainly needs to be modernized. But in my view, renegotiating NAFTA would be a good thing if we manage to further expand access to the Mexican markets and the Canadian markets. If we increase international trade, that'll be good for Texas, good for America. That'll produce more jobs.
Well, why is there such a deficit in Mexico's favor? How did that happen? Or a surplus on their side?
If you look at trade with Mexico, Texas does incredibly well. You look at something like building automobiles.
Right.
I've been down. I spent a lot of time on the border. We have factories all along the Texas side of the border, and a lot of how an automobile is built right now is they'll assemble some components on the U.S. side, they'll ship it down to Mexico, assemble other components there, they'll ship it back up to Texas, assemble other components here, and it ends up, the state of Texas is booming, and what I've urged the president to do, I think the greatest opportunity for NAFTA renegotiation is opening up the Mexican energy market. There's massive resources of oil and gas in Mexico that are not being developed because of their political and legal scenario.
Right.
We ought to open them up, and that would produce thousands of good jobs in Mexico, would help them develop a stronger middle class. That's good for Mexico.
Right.
But naturally, the place they would turn for the expertise to develop that oil and gas is Texas, and that would produce thousands of good-paying jobs for us, and I think that's a win-win for everybody. I think, on the other hand, it'd be a mistake if the administration listens to the voices in the administration that are advocating tariffs and shutting down trade. I think that would hurt Mexico, it would hurt Canada, but it would hurt Texas significantly. And it's the single biggest concern I hear from Texas business leaders and from farmers and ranchers across Texas is they're concerned about not being able to sell their crops and livestock and goods and services. And so I hope we can keep those markets open for Texans to sell to.
When it comes to our southern border, it's less of a sieve, but still a sieve. And when it comes to immigration issues, hopefully we can get that shored up. But one thing that you and I have talked about a million times, and you've educated me greatly, as well as my listeners and my viewers, is that DACA is unconstitutional. It's illegal. The President of the United States actually said, because you're a person between this age and that age, the fact that you did something illegal doesn't matter. If you're before that age or after that age, it does matter. So there is not legal, there isn't equal coverage of the laws when it comes to these specific people that he earmarked. You and I can agree until the cows come home that this is illegal and unconstitutional.
Yep.
Yet, Ted, we keep on getting these judges who say things like it was capricious to get rid of DACA. I mean, what are these judges talking about? Are they reading a different document than I am?
You know, they are. And I'll say today's ruling was yet another lawless ruling from a rogue judge. This was unfortunate because it was a judge that had been appointed by George W. Bush.
Right. We've
now had 3 judges say this. And listen, as you know, most of my career, I've been a constitutional litigator. I've represented Texas before the U.S. Supreme Court over and over again. Yeah. The legal theory these courts are laying out is not just weak. It's ludicrous. It is frivolous. And just to explain why. Look, when Obama issued DACA, originally, before he issued DACA, immigration extremists asked him, will you just unilaterally grant amnesty and refuse to enforce the law? And Obama said repeatedly, no, I can't. He said, I am not a king. I am not a monarch. I am not an emperor. That's Obama's own words.
Right.
And then one day decided politically, you know what, I think it'd be good for me to pretend I was a king, pretend I was a monarch. And so he just instructed the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security, ignore federal immigration laws, and in fact, print up documents that are labeled as work authorization and give them to people here illegally that the text of federal statutes say it is illegal for them to work in the United States because they came illegally. DACA was executive amnesty, was blatantly illegal. Trump comes in, he quite sensibly says, I'm no longer going to ignore the law, defy the law, refuse to obey the law. I'm going to obey the law.
Yeah.
And what this judge said today is it is unconstitutional for the president to obey the law. That's nutty. It is lawless, and I am confident the Supreme Court will reverse that decision. But it is unfortunate that we have had such a culture of judicial activism, particularly after 8 years of Obama, that there are federal judges that feel free to just decree you must embrace Obama's policies even if they're directly contrary to the law.
Just so that I'm clear on it, because as you've said many times, I'm not as smart as you. For my listeners,
I've never said that once.
I'm not sure. I think I have it on tape. I'm pretty sure. But just so I understand, the former president did something completely unconstitutional and illegal. The current president did something completely constitutional and legal to reverse it, and the latter is the one being stopped. So I'm clear. That's what's going on.
You are exactly right. You have a federal judge saying it is unconstitutional for the president to follow the law. Instead, you must continue breaking the law. And by the way, the text of the Constitution explicitly gives the president an obligation, a responsibility to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
Right.
So when Obama decreed executive amnesty, said, I'm going to ignore the law, he was violating the Constitution. He was violating his responsibility. When President Trump said, I'm going to follow the immigration law that's passed Congress and been signed into law, he was honoring the Constitution, and these judges are behaving in I think, a truly lawless manner.
Well, I want to take a hard turn here to very quickly, because I want to get into Alfie as well. The tax cuts, they've worked. 5 to 6 million Americans, or 4 to 6 million Americans, have gotten either a bonus or a raise. We're seeing manufacturing coming back. Billions and billions of dollars have been pledged by big corporations to bring their plants here and build and research and development and expand. The left, for some reason, wants to give free government jobs to people at $15 an hour because they say the tax cuts aren't working. Now, we know that that's nuts. That's like Baghdad Bob speaking. So when it comes to the tax cuts, real people who have logic and common sense know that they're working, but they do sunset. What do you do to make them permanent?
Well, I've introduced legislation to make the tax cuts permanent. Just today, to all of the Republican senators, I made the case that we ought to take this up and vote on making them permanent. You know, the week after we passed these tax cuts that have been tremendously successful, Texas is booming under these tax cuts.
Yep.
The week after they passed, Bernie Sanders was on one of the national TV shows, and he was asked, he said, look, these tax cuts are tax cuts for virtually every middle-class taxpayer in America. Isn't that a good thing? And Bernie said, of course. The problem is it's not permanent. Well, I saw that clip. I immediately tweeted out Bernie's clip. And I said, Bernie, I agree, and I've introduced legislation to make the individual tax cuts permanent. Join me and we can make this happen. It's the right thing to do, and my hope is Republicans will bring it up, we'll vote on it, and we'll make the individual tax cuts permanent, benefiting Texas families going forward for years to come.
I'm guessing Bernie Sanders will not co-author that with you.
Absolute crickets chirping, not a word from him. Apparently what he said on national television, that wasn't actually meant for anyone to act on it. That was just what you say on national television.
We had a situation in the UK with a baby named Charlie Gard, where the UK, for some reason, has the right to stop parents from seeking alternative treatment for their children who are going to die from their affliction. There's a new story about a child named Alfie that I guess there's some treatment in Italy that might help this child. Italy has said, bring the child, let's give it a shot. Why is the UK stopping this family from getting this treatment? What's going on?
Well, Pags, it's truly heartbreaking. You know, Alfie Evans is a 2-year-old child who was born in May of 2016, and he has an illness. He's been in a coma, and he's been on a ventilator. And Italy has offered to take him in. There's experimental treatment that could save his life, and his parents want to try. They want to try to save their son's life, and the United Kingdom is refusing to let the parents try to save their son's life, is saying, no, he must die. And in fact, the United Kingdom courts order the ventilator removed. They removed the ventilator 2 days ago, and the doctors predicted he would die within minutes. Well, it's been 2 days. Little Alfie continues to breathe without the ventilator. But every minute he's at risk of passing away because you want to understand the consequence of socialized medicine, of the government controlling your relationship with your doctor. You're seeing it in the United Kingdom, with the government saying, you, mom and dad, cannot you cannot try to save your son's life. The Italian hospital has said they want to treat this child, they want to save this child, and what the United Kingdom is saying is, no, your son must die, and we're going to stop you from trying to save his life. There's a reason that the Pope has personally intervened, saying, let us save this precious gift.
What is the reason given by UK? Why are they just saying because we say so?
It is the United Kingdom, the British court said, we control the national health system. We've determined we're cutting off the ventilator, and we're not going to let you choose anything else. And that, by the way, is the predictable and often inevitable consequence of socialized medicine, of the government being in charge of medicine. And you look at Bernie Sanders, or for that matter, my Democratic opponent, Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who wants the government in charge of your health care. Well, that means the government gets to say what the British government is saying, which is you don't get to act to try to save your child's life, even if there's a hospital ready to provide the care. We're seeing the United Kingdom stand in the way and say no. So I would encourage your listeners, join Heidi and me in praying for little Alfie, in lifting him up in prayer, but also in calling on the government of the United Kingdom. Stop blocking the rights of these parents to try to save their son.
Ted Cruz, thanks a million, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. God bless.